This session here this evening is talking about a vision of Ireland, and that's a very broad topic, and I just want to pick on a couple of particular issues. It's a broad issue, and I will put it in an overall context in relation to the EU towards the end. But when I was asked to draft a few words on the vision of Ireland, I just thought about one thing. That's our children. Because the vision is for the future. We're grown up, we're adults, we're moving on. The next generation and the generation after that is what we're talking about, our vision. And when they look back in 90 years' time, how will the Ireland be in those times compared to today? So we're heading now to the anniversary of 1916, and again, Michael did mention the proclamation, and I do have to quote one section from it. The aims of that was to cherish all our children equally. 100 years on, can we say we've done that as a nation? I think the answer is firmly no. We have not done that. We made strides in lots of areas, but we haven't cherished our children equally. And that's why I actually believe the vision of Ireland has to be based on our children for the future. And even yesterday's paper proved that, where it says 25% of 3-year-olds in Ireland are already overweight and unhealthily obese. And that is through a lack of education. Not by the children, unfortunately, but by their parents who are feeding them food that is leaving them to be excessively overweight at 3 years of age. We're already seeing a divide at that early stage. So we have to put our resources into the preschool area to ensure that children are getting proper nourishment and proper food and proper physical education to make sure that they are healthy in the overall situation. And then I look at people coming out of school at the other end at the moment, and we're one of the worst in the OECD. There's 30% of people at 25 years of age or in their early 20s who are either not in full-time education or in employment. That's a very, very high figure, and it's something that we will have to reverse. And I think that can only be reversed through a country like ours that is a democracy, and we elect a government who provide the public services. And we have to look at our public services as to how they're working for the people. And I'm Fianna Fáil spokesperson on public expenditure and the public service, and I believe we have outstanding public servant, but we don't have sufficient joined-up thinking in the public service. And we see examples of this every day. And I think if government departments and sections of government could work more closely for individuals, I think we would have a much better service. I mentioned the children. We have difficulties between the HSE and the Department of Education as to who's responsible for children in difficulty. We have a new Department of Children that hopefully will help that, but it could be another tier in the level of bureaucracy dealing with children. I look at some examples like the biggest challenge facing us today is employment and jobs for young people. And we have 2 departments dealing with jobs and social protection. We need to have one in this area. And again, there are many state agencies, both nationally like the IDA and other people, who could work with local organisations, but they don't see it as their brief to do so. Key issue here is about the resources of the country. Who owns them? Who manages them? In a way, I'm not overly interested in that philosophical debate once they're used for the benefit of the people of Ireland. The ownership, some people can argue about that, for centuries, but I look at it this way, and I think the example has been proved. For 100 years, we had banks in private ownership, and they look after themselves. They're now in state ownership. I think they're behaving as they always did. They're sending out letters to people in mortgage arrears, to surrender their house. That's the banks back to form. So in a way, it doesn't matter who owns the actual resources once they're put to the people of Ireland. We have the situation, and Jane Fintan Lalor referred to the sod and the land, and we can talk about that. We're now going on to privatise our water here in the country. Many people would say that's either a good thing or a bad thing. I think the most important thing is we have clean, healthy water. So the ownership of our resources is not the issue as far as I'm concerned. It's the use to which they're put for the people of Ireland. And the people of Ireland, we have to remember, is only the island of Ireland, about 5 million people. We're less than 1,000th of the world's population, and we have to bear that in mind. And the future of Ireland and the vision for Ireland, as I say, is in our children's education. If children are coming out of our schools with a good education, I think the future is good. If the children are not coming out with a good education, we can talk about all the problems in society, and they won't be solved until we get our education right. And that starts at the very early stage. And it does lead us to one of the vision questions about state intervention. How much state intervention do you have with a 3-year-old who is clearly unhealthy because he's not getting the proper food at home? Some people would say the state needs to intervene. other people will say the family is sacrosanct and the state shouldn't intervene. They are the issues that we have to resolve to get our situation right in relation to dealing with children for the future. We have to look at what we're good at in Ireland. And I think people overestimate some of our natural assets. We all know we're a good, strong agricultural country, but we have great innovation in the information technology area and our culture. And part of the reason we're here today is because of our culture. It's a cultural event as much as everything else. The Seamus Heaney's and the Becketts and the Riverdance, they are worldwide names in the world, and they bring benefit to Ireland. And these are the areas we have to facilitate and develop. Finally, I just want to conclude on the financial matters, the vision for the future, because there's no point in not dealing with some of the practicalities. And I had an upsetting week last week as you were elected member on the Oireachtas Finance Committee, when we wanted to get pre-budget submissions from various organisations, from the employers to the various non-governmental organisations. And it sat through 36 budget submissions in that. And it was actually depressing. Some of those people came in with one point of view, others came in with the opposite. And really the submission boiled down to between the haves and the have-nots. The employers came in and said the entire adjustment for the budget this year should be on the expenditure side, social welfare and health and education. The people who were on the front line feeling that one said there should be more taxation. And I was left at the end of it feeling we have a long way to travel in society at the moment when we still have people with so diverse views. And it all boils down to those who are well off versus those who are not well off. The state has a duty to families in relation to housing and ownership and mortgages. And I think that has been mentioned quite a bit, and we won't go into it today. But politics has a role to play in the vision of the future. And the thing I would like to see change most in politics is the gender quota. There are too many men in Dáil Éireann. There are too many men on the county councils. There are too many men county managers. There are too many men on state board. There are too many men secretary generals of government departments. And I actually think we need a much greater role, and we're starting it in terms of gender quotas on the Dáil, but that has to extend by legislation to every other single area I've just mentioned. We also need an occupation quota, because in the Dáil the biggest occupation now is teachers. And as time develops, the number of teachers in the Dáil is increasing and increasing, so much so that we won't have a proper mix of Irish society in the Dáil, and that needs to be reversed. Finally, I think when I talk about the vision of Ireland, I think we can't look at the vision of Ireland in an insular manner, Ireland as an island. We have to look at it in our role in Europe, because more and more and more of what happens is dictated by EU level. And I think we have to really talk about the vision of Ireland in Europe, not just the vision of Ireland for Ireland. And finally, we have to talk about the vision of Ireland where we stand in the world, not just in the EU. We have big relations with the United States of America. The international institutions like the United Nations are role in relation to those. And we do have to decide where is Ireland in the world in the future, because these bodies do have a big influence. And finally, in relation to democracy in the country, we do have democracy here, and I actually think we're fortunate in Ireland that we have that, but other countries in Europe had their governments removed for them, not by the democratic process. The Italians and the Greece, their governments and prime ministers were removed, even though they had been elected by the people, because the international bankers and the EU Commission wanted to do so. So that is really what we have to watch, is the creeping European and international movement by international institutions to be able to change governments at their decision and not at the decision at local level. So my view is that the future and the vision of Ireland rests in education of our young children. If we get that right, we're doing very well. If we don't get that right, I think we will be back here having the same discussion in the years to come. Thank you.